You did something well at work, and something about the room changed. It was not dramatic, nobody announced anything. For a few days after the recognition, you felt like the system was finally behaving the way it was supposed to behave. Reward was following performance. Your name was in the right rooms. The logic held. Then the temperature around your desk started to change. A joke in a meeting landed with a small edge on it. You caught it and filed it. A week later, credit for something you did got spread evenly across the team in a way that did not match how the work actually happened. You filed that too. A colleague who had been warm went polite. A manager who had been generous got vague. The chats you used to be in had moved slightly. Nothing had been said to your face, nothing had been written down, but something in the social weather around you was no longer what it had been. You told yourself you were imagining it. You were not. This is where it begins. It keeps happening. The next time you do something well, the same sequence runs. Praise, then minimization. Warmth in public, distance in private. Your wins get explained away in small ways you cannot argue with. Someone points out that the project was an easy one. Someone points out that the timing was lucky. Someone reframes the result as a team effort in a meeting where the team did not show up. Your ideas get overlooked in the moment and repeated by someone else 20 minutes later, and that person receives the nod you did not. Certain lunches go without you. Certain decisions go without you. Certain threads go silent when your name comes into them. After any recognition, the tone around you cools for a stretch, normalizes, and then cools again the next time you perform. That is when it stops being about your work. You start to notice a specific gap. The gap between what the performance review says about you and what the hallway says about you. The review reads well, the hallway reads cold. Both are real. The company is extracting value from you on paper, while the people around you are extracting cost from you in small movements you cannot point at in a meeting. You thought that if you kept delivering, the strangeness would pass. It did not pass. It compounded. Working harder made it louder. Being more helpful made you more visible. Volunteering for more gave the environment more surface area to react to. Every move you made to fix the situation was the wrong move, because the situation was not a misunderstanding, it was a response. And the response got stronger every time you produced another reason for it. That is where you lost control of the situation. You assumed work was rational. You assumed that output produced reward, that competence earned trust, and that recognition was a signal the system was working correctly. You were wrong about what kind of system you are standing inside of. The workplace advertises itself as a meritocracy. It measures you, it scores you, it claims to pay you for performance. The mechanics are set up to look like output in, reward out. What actually happens is that your performance moves through two systems at the same time. The formal one, which says what the review says, and the informal one, which decides who is comfortable with you, who is not, and what the group is going to do about the discomfort you are causing. The formal system is the one the company talks about. The informal one is the one that runs your day, and the informal one does not tolerate visible excellence. This is the point where something starts changing inside you and you do not notice it yet. You start editing yourself before you speak. You add qualifiers to sentences that did not need qualifiers. You soften the delivery. You volunteer a little less. You still do the work, but you package the work differently. You give more credit away than the work actually required. You downplay wins. You start to notice that you are managing the room's comfort instead of the room's work. That adjustment does not feel like shrinking. It feels like maturity. It feels like you finally learned how to play politics. A colleague might even compliment the new version of you, more collaborative, more measured, easier to work with. That is the part nobody tells you. The compliment is a closing door. It marks the moment the system has successfully taught you the new size it expects you to take up, and it rewards you for accepting it. What you are inside of has a name. People who study it call it tall poppy syndrome. In a field of poppies, the ones that grow taller than the rest get cut down to match. In a workplace, the people who grow taller than the group through visibility, competence, recognition, or pace get trimmed back. Sometimes the trimming is loud. Most of the time it is almost invisible, a cooling of tone, a reassignment of credit, a few words placed carefully in the right ear. That is not a metaphor, that is a mechanism. The mechanism runs on something old. When you rise, you do not rise alone. Everyone standing near you feels themselves drop in relative position, even if nothing about their own work has changed. That is the first layer, social comparison. It happens in milliseconds, below conscious thought, and it happens to every person near you, whether they like you or not. The second layer is what that drop cost them. It cost them their place in the unofficial order that runs underneath the org chart. That order is how they know who they are at work, who speaks first, who gets deferred to, who is on the inside of a decision and who is not. Your rise breaks that answer for them. They have to build a new one, and building a new one takes energy they did not plan to spend. The third layer is what they build with that energy. They build a new story about you that protects their place in the order. Too much, too intense, too political, too eager, too ambitious. The labels sound like feedback. They are maintenance on the group structure, delivered in your direction so the rest of the structure does not have to move. You feel the labels before you hear them, a kind of low hum in the room, a sense that people have arrived at a conclusion about you they are not going to share with you directly. By the time any of it gets said out loud, the conclusion has already been operating for weeks, shaping decisions that were made without you at the table, and the version of you that walks into meetings is a version that exists first in other people's heads before it gets a chance to be yours. The attack was never about your work. Your work was fine. Your work is still fine. That is the whole trick. This is where people get it wrong. They look for a single action they can point to, a single comment, a single exclusion, a single line in an email. They want a smoking gun. There is no smoking gun. The system does not produce smoking guns. It produces small, repeated adjustments, each of which is deniable on its own, which combine into a structure that is not deniable at all once you know what you are looking at. Every comment can be framed as honest feedback. Every exclusion can be framed as scheduling. Every reassignment of credit can be framed as collaboration. The pattern protects itself through plausible deniability at every level. That is why it is hard to name while it is happening and much easier to name 6 months later when you look back and the pattern is the only thing you can see. Management is not an innocent party in this. It is easy to blame the people around you. The people were responding to something bigger than them. The conditions for what you are experiencing are built into the structure of most companies on purpose. Recognition is scarce by design. Only so many promotions are available each cycle. Only so many high visibility projects exist in a quarter. Only so many names fit on the leadership slide. Compensation is hidden, which forces people to estimate their value by comparing themselves to peers instead of to their actual worth. Promotion criteria are kept vague, which means the deciding factor is rarely performance alone. It is perception. Internal competition is not a byproduct of these choices. It is the design. It keeps people focused inward, watching each other, instead of outward, watching the company. Now add forced distribution on top. Many calibrations cap how many people can be rated at the top. Managers gather in a room and trade names against each other. Your rating depends not only on your own work, but on who else is competing for the same slot. In that room, a visible top performer costs your manager political capital. Your manager is incentivized to keep you productive without marking you too visibly, because the marking is what triggers the fight in the calibration meeting. Even your manager, if they are paying attention, knows this. Some of them handle it honestly and tell you the rules of the room. Most of them do not, because saying it out loud would cost them more than letting you figure it out on your own. So you get vague feedback, vague timelines, vague reassurances, and the actual calculation stays inside a conversation you are not in. The room was not broken, it was built this way. The organization wants your output. It does not want the social disruption your excellence causes. It wants the results on the slide without the repositioning in the group. So it handles the contradiction by using you in private and undercrediting you in public. You are allowed to perform. You are not allowed to stand out while doing it. You are not punished for failing. You are punished for being seen succeeding. Those two sentences describe the actual operating contract, and the contract is never written down because writing it down would make it impossible to pretend otherwise. Your work shows up in decks with other names attached to it. Your ideas get absorbed into broader team narratives. Your performance gets described in group terms. You carry more of the load and less of the recognition, and the tension that builds around your visibility is something you are expected to absorb without naming it. That is the arrangement. You deliver, somebody else gets the title. And if you push back on the arrangement, you become the problem it was designed to solve. When the hostility does surface, it rarely arrives as open criticism. It arrives as language. You are told you are a bit much. You are told you are not a team player. You are told you are trying too hard. You are told you are too eager. You are told you need to read the room. You are told you come across as intense. You are told you are ambitious in a tone that is clearly not a compliment. These phrases sound like feedback. That is not feedback. That is positioning. Real feedback points at a behavior you can change and a standard you can meet. These phrases point at your presence in the group. They are designed to make you smaller, not better. The person delivering them often cannot articulate what exactly you should do differently because the real request is not behavioral, it is positional. They want you to take up less room in the group's attention. That is the actual note. The note cannot be written down because writing it down would make it unusable, so it gets delivered through language that means one thing on paper and another thing in practice, and the gap between the two is where you are supposed to lose. There is a paradox here you have probably already felt. The same traits that get you mentioned in leadership meetings are the traits that get you punished by your peers. The same behavior the company is using as an example in its town halls is the behavior your coworkers are using as evidence that you need to be managed down. You are the asset and the threat in the same body on the same day, and the company has no incentive to resolve the contradiction because the contradiction is what makes you cheap. Over time, that gap does something specific to you. Stage 1 is confusion. You notice the cooling. You notice the exclusions. You cannot find the action that would explain the response. You replay meetings. You reread emails. You search for the error. You do not find one because there is not one to find. Stage 2 is self-monitoring. You are now running a second job in the background. The first job is the work you were hired to do. The second job is making sure the first job does not cost you too much. Nobody told you the second job existed. It is not on your performance review. It is not in your contract, but you are working it every day, and it is eating the attention you used to spend on being good at the first one. Stage 3 is shrinking in the real sense. You hold back ideas you used to share immediately. You decline visibility you would have accepted a year ago. You let other people present your work, not because they asked to, but because you have learned what happens when you present it yourself, and the learning has already automated into a reflex you did not install and cannot easily remove. You stop volunteering. You stop pushing. The version of you the company is now getting is a reduced version, engineered to survive the social system rather than to perform at the ceiling of your ability. The system does not remove you. It teaches you to reduce yourself. And this is where it gets ugly. The reduction is the goal. The reduction is what the structure around you was pressuring toward the whole time. Every cool tone, every reassigned credit, every softened compliment was a small piece of pressure aimed at exactly this outcome. The moment you shrink, the room is comfortable again. The hierarchy stabilizes. The group rewards you for your compliance by being warmer to the smaller version of you than it ever was to the larger one. You learn that the smaller version is safer. You start to prefer it. You start to forget what the larger version even felt like. That is the part that stays with you after you leave. Not the lost credit, not the meetings that went without you, the slow forgetting. The moment a year in when you realize you have not put forward an idea in public in a long time, and you are not sure whether it is because you have stopped having them or because you have stopped trusting the room to hear them. There is a fair objection to all of this, and it deserves an honest answer. Some people are genuinely arrogant. Some people do brag. Some people do perform their competence in ways that create real friction. That is real. The concern here is different. The same system that correctly identifies arrogance also mislabels ordinary excellence as arrogance. Someone who speaks clearly in meetings gets called intense. Someone who delivers consistently gets called a show-off. Someone who asks direct questions gets called political. Someone who sets standards gets called difficult. The label arrives, the label sticks, and the label travels through the group faster than any evidence ever would. By the time anyone asks whether the label is accurate, it has become the working definition of who you are. You assumed people were evaluating your behavior. They were protecting their position. The people most likely to be targeted share a small set of traits. They are visible, they get recognized, they rise fast, they communicate well. They are often the ones leadership points to as examples. The traits that get you praised upward are frequently the same traits that get you punished sideways. There is a sharper version of this for women and for people from outside the dominant group in any given workplace. The labels come faster. The tolerance for visible competence is lower. The distance between ambitious and too ambitious is shorter. The data is imperfect, but the pattern is consistent enough across reporting and research to take seriously rather than wave away. It rarely starts as a group behavior. It starts with one person. One colleague feels the threat first and begins to reframe you in small comments to others. Those comments are tentative at first. A raised eyebrow, a careful word, a worry framed as concern. If nobody pushes back, the framing takes hold. 2 or 3 people agreeing with it, even passively, is enough. Within weeks, it becomes the room's working definition of who you are. The engine is silence. Nobody has to organize anything. Nobody has to agree in advance. The group only has to fail to object. That is all it takes. Once it becomes acceptable to be cool toward you, the coolness spreads on its own. And by the time you notice it is spread, it has already rewritten your position in the group. Remote and hybrid work have added a new surface for the same mechanism. You sent a 2-line reply to a project thread on a Tuesday afternoon. No tone in it, just efficient. By Thursday, 3 people who had not been on the original thread had seen a screenshot of it in a separate chat where someone had framed it as dismissive. By the following Monday, that framing had become the working story about you in a meeting you were not in. You never saw the chat. You will never see the chat. A decision about your next project got made on the basis of how your message read to someone scrolling through a bad mood on a Wednesday night. That is what has changed. Visibility is fragmented now. Some people see you in meetings and nowhere else. Decisions happen in private channels you cannot see. Tone is easier to manipulate in writing. A single screenshot can travel further in an afternoon than any correction you could send would travel in a week. And the people shaping your reputation often have never been in a room with you at all. Same mechanism, different surface, same outcome. The cost of all this is not only personal, it is organizational. When high performers learn to reduce themselves, innovation drops. Candor disappears, because candor requires visibility, and visibility has been made expensive. People stop raising hard questions in meetings. They stop pushing back on bad decisions. They stop offering the unusual idea. The safest behavior becomes average behavior, delivered on time, framed carefully, attributed generously. Mediocrity becomes the rational choice for anyone who has been through one cycle of this and learned what visibility actually costs. The system is not protecting performance. It is protecting comfort. It is protecting the existing order. The company pays for this in output it will never see, in ideas that never leave the person's head, in talent that eventually walks out for somewhere that handles visible excellence better, or gives up internally and stays in a smaller form for as long as the paycheck continues. If you are inside this pattern right now, there are a few things worth understanding about what not to do. Over-explaining yourself makes it worse. The more you justify your work, the more the justification becomes the story. The work should carry itself. When you narrate it heavily, you give the group a way to frame you as defensive, which is exactly the frame the room was already reaching for. Chasing validation from the people who have cooled on you is usually a waste of what you have left. That door is generally closed before you notice it closed. Trying to reopen it teaches the group that their treatment of you works and invites more of it. Fake humility is also a trap. It is visible. It reads as weakness. It confirms the label rather than dissolving it. The goal is to be accurately seen, and when accurate seeing is not available inside the current room, the answer is to stop spending your energy trying to fix that room. This is strategy, not coping. Coping is trying to feel better inside a system that is closing around you. Strategy is seeing the system clearly enough to decide what you are willing to spend on it, what you are not, and where your output would be met with something other than a recalibration of the room's comfort. One more thing. The people treating you this way are rarely the problem in isolation. They are responding to conditions the organization built. Move them to a different company with different scarcity rules and different recognition practices, and many of them would behave differently toward the same kind of person. The room is the issue. The room is what you are evaluating. What you are running into is a rule you have lived under for years without ever hearing it said out loud. The rule was never do your best. The rule was do well, but not so well that the people around you have to recalculate themselves. Every workplace enforces that rule every day in small, invisible movements, and almost none of them ever say it. The system does not reward excellence, it manages it. What was done to you was not personal, it was maintenance. The room was protecting its shape. You happened to be the part of it that moved. And then, slowly, you stopped moving. You thought you were adapting. You were being shaped. You thought you were learning the politics of the room. The room was learning how to contain you. You thought you were becoming mature. What you were becoming was compatible. The career cost shows up in your title, your compensation, your trajectory. The deeper cost is harder to see. It is how much of yourself you handed over without realizing a trade was happening, and how much of that handoff followed you out the door when you eventually left. That is the part they were never going to say to your face. You were supposed to never hear it.